Very good afternoon. Thanks very much, Professor Umesh Khanna and his team for organizing such a wonderful academic feast and inviting me to be part of it. The topic for today's discussion is hyperuricemia in chronic kidney disease, a contentious issue. There are a lot of uncertainties about this topic. This title may sound very simple, but actually it is a very difficult and contentious issue where there are so many unresolved questions remain. For instance, the definition of hyperuricemia is uncertain. There's a lot of debate going on because of the wide variation in the serum uric acid level in the population. We don't know at which point it becomes a disease. That's number one. Number two, the popularly accepted consensus for the cutoff value of serum uric acid for definition of hyperuricemia is based on uric acid solubility point at physiological temperature and pH, namely 6.8 milligram per deciliter. But as you all know, the level of uric acid should be slightly lower in women because estrogen is uricosuric. Having said that, with a special reference to chronic kidney disease, we all know there is a very high prevalence of hyperuricemia, mostly asymptomatic hyperuricemia in CKD, according to one series, from stages 1 to 3 as high as 40%, and stage 4 and 5 as high as 70% of the patients of CKD have hyperuricemia. Uric acid has got important physiological roles. The two important ones are, it is one of the mechanisms of elimination of nitrogenous waste from the body. And two, it is a potent antioxidant. You'll be surprised to know that more than 50% of serum's free radical scavenging is done by uric acid. Actually, it has got a dual role. It is a friend as well as a foe. In extracellular uric acid, it confers endothelial cytoprotection. It is important for endothelial health. In fact, compared to all other animal species, the human species, the Homo sapiens, we are lacking the enzyme uricase, which causes degradation of uric acid. This mutation, thereby resulting in disappearance of the uricase enzyme, occurred as a kind of an evolutionary advantage so that Homo sapiens can have higher level of uric acid that is important for sustaining endothelial health. It is of such a great importance, the physiological role of uric acid. But the same uric acid, when it is there inside the cell, it behaves like a villain. It is a pro-oxidant. It enhances the production of free radicals. And it initiates a host of pro-inflammatory cascades. And also it causes immune activation. It enhances the action of CD8 cells and so on. So this is the uric acid paradox. Can uric acid injure kidney? It seems to be so, at least in animal experiments. It can cause direct toxicity to the crystal, that is direct toxicity to the kidneys. And we have to analyze the nephrotoxicity of uric acid and two broad mechanisms. One is the crystal effect and the non-crystal effect. Whatever I'm describing is a non-crystal effect of uric acid on the kidney. It can directly impair the kidney function. Also, it can cause exacerbation of factors which affect the kidney, like hypertension. There are many observational studies. They link hyperuricemia with hypertension, increasing blood pressure. It causes renal vasoconstriction and inflicts endothelial dysfunction, causes activation of renin, upregulation of angiotensin II, thereby promoting the proliferation of vascular smooth muscle cells. And particularly at the glomerular level, it causes pre-glomerular vasculopathy and pro-inflammatory signaling, and ultimately that can result in interstitial inflammation. All these are observed in animal experiments. As well as there were many population-based controls, cohort studies and observational studies, which show a graded association between the serum uric acid level and development of CKD. This prompted many investigators to investigate further and to establish this causal relationship between hyperuricemia and the chronic kidney disease. The famous MDRD study, modification of diet and renal study cohort, in which about 838 patients with CKD 3 and 4, when they were followed up for a decade, there was a positive association between uric acid level and cardiovascular and overall mortality. But mind you, there was no relationship with kidney failure. So this kind of conflicting reports are there even in observational studies. But to confirm this association, we had to go ahead with randomized controlled trial. I'll talk about that in a short while. How about hyperuricemia and dialysis patients? Again, it is very highly prevalent. Very interestingly, uric acid is easily dialysable in hemodialysis. So the levels of uric acid in hemodialysis, there are multiple determinants. It all depends on the timing of your estimation in the serum. Soon after dialysis, it will be very low and so on. And also among hemodialysis patients, the inverse relationship between uric acid level and the cardiovascular mortality has been identified. Whereas in CAPD, there is lesser clearance of uric acid. And in CAPD, the relationship between hyperuricemia and the cardiac mortality and overall mortality is not consistent. There are varying reports. Fine. I was talking about the RCTs, the randomized control trial, which are the only research tool, which can, with certainty, prove a relationship between a potentially injurious agent and the causation of a disease. Let me highlight on two important RCTs on this particular question recently published. The one, serum urate lowering with allopurinol in kidney function in type 1 diabetes. This is called PEARL trial, prevention of early renal loss trial. This is the infographics. It is a multi-center, double-blinded, randomized control trial. 530 patients with type 1 diabetes and mild to moderate diabetic kidney disease. They were included in this. And they were randomized to allopurinol group versus a placebo group. The primary endpoint was the mean iohexol-based GFR. It is a measured GFR, not an estimated GFR, after 3-year follow-up. As you can see here, the allopurinol had no clinically meaningful beneficial effect on the kidney outcome. So further elaborating on this trial, the primary outcome, as I well said, iohexol-based GFR after 3 years. Secondary outcomes, iohexol-based GFR time trajectory, the slope of decline in GFR, eGFR based on CKD-AP formula at 4 months, doubling of serum creatinine and progression to ESRD, urine albumin excretion rate after 3 years, and finally, fatal or non-fatal cardiovascular events. There are many strengths of this particular trial. Let me elaborate on that. The study population was highly suitable. Why I say that? These study subjects had a rate of decline of GFR to the tune of about 2.5 ml per minute per year, meaning this is a vulnerable group for rapid progression of CKD. So ideal group where an intervention has to be studied. That's number one. And there was an 80% power of the study to detect a clinically meaningful treatment effect. And the study population showed a very high adherence to trial intervention. There was a sustained reduction of 36% in uric acid level in the allopurinol group till the end of this trial. As well as, the more importantly, the other co-founders, the glycemic status, blood pressure profile, and the RAS inhibition were balanced between the groups at baseline as well as throughout the entire trial. So these are the strength of this trial. So we have to take the results with a lot of respect. As you can see here, this panel, the left-hand side panel shows there was a sustained reduction in serum uric acid level by 36% in the allopurinol group. So the drug was very effective. The down column shows there was no significant difference in iohexol-based eGFR. So it is a negative based GFR. So it is a negative study. Let me go to the second RCT, effect of allopurinol on the progression of chronic kidney disease. The first one was in type 1 diabetes, but this is general. This is called CKD fixed trial, RCT, stages 3 and 4 CKD patients without history of gout. The inclusion criteria, eGFR decrease at least 3 ml per minute per 1.73 square meter in the preceding year. And 1:1 randomization between the groups, between allopurinol and placebo group. The primary outcome was change in eGFR from randomization to week 104. That is 2 years. And here the GFR was estimated GFR based on CKD-AP formula. And the drug was effective in reducing the serum uric acid in the allopurinol group to the tune of about 2.7 milligram per deciliter. But as you can see here, by the end of 2 years, it did not slow the decline in eGFR as compared to the placebo. So at a second RCT, it was a negative trial. So where do we stand? So these are the secondary outcomes of this CKD fixed trial. 40% decline in EGFR and end-stage kidney disease, death from any cause, fatal or non-fatal cardiovascular event, hospitalization for any cause. All these were, there was no significant difference. Let me talk about one more study. There is a Korean cohort study. It was again a prospective cohort study of 2,402 patients. They were classified into quartiles on the basis of serum uric acid level. And the composite renal outcome was need for dialysis or transplantation, doubling of serum creatinine from baseline. The important findings are the risk of progression to renal failure increased by 28% for each 1 milligram per deciliter increase from baseline. So it is a very important point. But the propensity score matching analysis to study the effect of uric acid lowering therapy, it failed to show any renal protection offered by either allopurinol or febuxostat. So this is no CKD trial. And finally, one more trial using febuxostat, that is FEATHER trial, asymptomatic hyperuricemia, application of febuxostat, a randomized control trial, 462 patients with stage 3 CKD with asymptomatic hyperuricemia, febuxostat versus placebo, follow-up for about 108 weeks, that is 2 years plus. Unfortunately, febuxostat did not mitigate CKD progression in stage 3 CKD patients. And finally, very interesting observation. This is called something called Mendelian randomization. What is this? The Mendelian randomization is a very novel concept in the sense that there are large data sets are available, like cardiovascular health study trial, and so on. There's a huge databases available, and just analyzing the 26 important single nucleotide variations of the genes which have an impact on the uric acid level, whether there is any association between the prevalence of this genetic risk score based on these genetic single nucleotide variations resulting in hyperuricemia and CKD. It's a kind of a bird's eye view. This study also failed to show kind of association between the increased uric acid level resulting in genetic mutations and the CKD. And finally, so this is another important study that showed it's a multicentric, double-blinded, randomized trial. The patients with gout who were on febuxostat versus allopurinol. Median follow-up was 32 months. The purpose of this study was to compare the effectiveness of febuxostat with allopurinol in handling hyperuricemia in gout. It has got nothing to do with the kidney failure. But look at the findings. The all-cause and cardiovascular mortality were higher in the febuxostat group than the allopurinol group. It is a bit disturbing. After this, there is a lot of discussion about the cardiovascular safety of febuxostat. But I went through this trial. It's not very decisive. It is not coming out with a very clear-cut statement linking febuxostat with cardiovascular morbidity, mortality. But it has stirred up a lot of interest. This is important in the sense that when we apply medications to bring down the serum uric acid level, without known benefit, without definite effect of that, the agent which we are using should be absolutely safe. So I think in future, there will be more studies on febuxostat cardiovascular safety. So as of now, there is no definitive evidence for beneficial role of uric acid lowering therapy in retarding CKD progression. This is my final statement. And I take this opportunity to invite you all for the 51st Annual Conference of Indian Society of Nephrology to be held at Chennai. I happen to be the organizing secretary. Please block your states. Thank you very much.